Is Active Network with an iPause update. I see Gary at the podium, so welcome, Gary.
All right, well, good morning, Chairman Howard, Commissioners, Director Broscheid. Again, I'm Gary Thorson, Assistant Director of the Information and Education Branch. And the purpose of this presentation is to provide you with an update of our plans to implement iPause. And for those of you that attended the September Commission meeting, you're well aware that we're 7 weeks away from go live. And our project team from OIT, from Active Network, and from Colorado Parks and Wildlife have been working nonstop to get this ready to go. And so for our presentation this morning, we'll have Kathy Chase from OIT. She's the IT Director for DNR and CPW. We'll provide a review and status of the project milestones. Gary Evans with Active Network will cover the measures and actions that they have in place to prepare for go live and post go live. Paul Wolf, CPW's selling agent coordinator, will cover how we're preparing our selling agents around the state for go live. And then Corey Chick, CPW's license and reservations manager, will provide a summary and a wrap on the presentation. So, but are there any initial questions before we begin? Okay, well let's have Kathy Chase from OIT come up and kick this off. Kathy?
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Howard, Director Broscheid, the Commissioners. I'm going to go through some of the critical path milestones that we have so that you have an up-to-date status of where we are with the tasks for this particular project. As Gary indicated, we are about 7 weeks out, and we, the entire team, OIT, Active, and CPW, all feel very, very strongly, very comfortable that we are going to make go live on time, and we're not going to have, well, we're hoping not to have a lot of issues. It's IT, so there will be bugs. But so I'm just going to go through some of the tasks. A lot of the top critical path milestone tasks have been completed, and they are at 100%. Active's development PCR's go live, that is still out a ways. It's not due until November 24th. They're about 69%. Active configuration additional PCR's go live, that is 12/8, and they're at about 24%. OIT development post-draw, that one I need to update the date. Right now we are closer to about 90%. It was due on October 18th. I got a status this morning that said there are 2 remaining tasks to finish, which we are doing as we speak. So we hope to have them probably completed early next week. Let's see. The financial process continues to move along. We are at 87% there. Let's see. User acceptance testing and end-to-end draw testing, that continues to move forward. We are set to wrap up UAT testing next week on November 22nd, and that looks to be on schedule. System testing for the 2017 post-draw business tasks, that is ongoing, and there is progress on that. It is an ongoing task because it's a continual, sort of a cyclical process. So it's, you know, you make changes, you check to ensure that everything still continues to look okay. Reports are looking fine, those kinds of things. So that's why it's at 99%. It'll continue to complete and finish as we finish all of those tasks. And then user acceptance testing non-draw, like I said, that is set to complete on November 22nd, and we are on schedule to do that. The other tasks below are the tasks that Active, those are specific to Active tasks, and those seem to be looking pretty good. As of the Wednesday executive briefing, from what I heard, most of the stuff is continuing, so it's in progress and it's on time. So I don't really see any issues in completing those final tasks before go live. All right, that's what I wanted to cover. Do we have any questions?
Pardon me. I have a PowerPoint with the critical path milestones, and it's sort of cut off. Do we have a? I don't know if I'm the only commissioner that has that, but do we have any kind of printout or?
I did not
I
print
should have
that.
mentioned this earlier, because I noticed it when I first looked at it last week.
Do you
but-
have one, Corey? I didn't print it.
I can
sorry.
email you one. I just have it on email right now, sorry.
You got a full one? Oh, okay,
I
great.
don't know why yours is like that.
Yeah, thank you. If you just give me a sec, I'd just like to be able to look at it. I might have a question or two.
Okay.
On the testing, I think, Corey, you gave us a briefing on that, and essentially, as I understand it, what's going on there is the original plan for testing got modified, and so much of that isn't necessarily behind schedule because we made some changes on the testing. Am I getting that right? Or the testing is still on track from your perspective?
That's correct. I mean, and there's multiple parts to it, Chairman Howard. There's the draw portion, and then there's just the UAT, the non-draw. In the explanation, or I guess a couple, actually probably about a month ago, I gave an update, and it explained, because it showed or looked like we were behind, and that was the explanation I gave, that we changed the path on how we were doing the draws. So instead of cutting it out into chunks and doing little chunks in the draw, we were running by species from A to Z. So it just made it look like it was behind, but it actually finished on time. The leftover draw just finished. So that's going to get us into the big game cells that'll kick off and go pretty fast. The UAT, and I was going to touch on it. I can touch on it now. That's fine. Currently in the plan shows us at 65%. Right now we're working on certifications with Active, which are more of the non-testable items that are, it's more of the, not functionality, but for instance, the system shall be able to take 20,000 hits in the first minute. That type of, it's just, you can't really test that. I mean, you can look at metrics, but you really, until you get 20,000 people that hit the system, you can't test that. So it's a certification, and that's also tied to the SLA, the service level agreement. So right now, and those should be approved probably either today or Monday, which will automatically, just the certification, bump us up to 75% overall pass rating.
Have you had to make any more changes to your testing regime, or has that been stable since we last talked?
It's in a process. I can't say there's been big changes like we did with the draw. A lot of the tests, so if you look at the remainder of the 25% that has not passed, some of those are going to be deferreds, and some of them are 7/8 passed. But it's that 1/8 that we just don't have time to do, whether it's larger configuration or even some reprogramming. There's just no time in the schedule. All those have been either mitigated or in the process of being mitigated for deferral. And then we're mapping those out as far as the quarter that they would fall into post-go live.
Commissioner McDaniel, I know you have a lot of expertise in this area.
A couple questions. So the remaining schedule, and I'm following up on your question, Commissioner Howard, are the dates here unmodified, or are they now the expected start and planned end dates for example, the deployment, getting the production image in, and so forth? Were the ones that specifically that show 0% complete at this time?
Okay. So a couple of them that I see is system testing big game cells. That's one of them. Again, everything has to go in order. So even if it shows a start date, for instance, on that one of 11/1, it cannot start until we finish the leftover draw. So it's not that it's behind. It's actually a pretty fast process. It's just, I mean, building that schedule, of course, you have to have a start date and an end date. And I mean, we're in that window, and we're even that one at 0%. There's no issues right now that would prevent us from meeting that end date, either ahead of time or on schedule. When you look at some of them, and it might be active that speaks to some of these, for instance, the equipment deployment, I can't say that 0% is probably exactly correct, but it's hard to put a number on the test pilot that Paul's doing right now with our vendors. I guess if you looked at the overall pictures, all the machines currently are with the third-party vendor that puts in the final image. So there has been some movement. It's hard to quantify until you start shipping machines out. But again, all of that is all well within scope, and no understanding of where that would fall behind. So.
What would be extremely helpful for me is maybe you could give me a reflection, since it's kind of hard to see from the schedule. You made a reference to the health of the project. So in terms of the various aspects, whether it's hardware deployment, testing aspects, user acceptance, training, you take those pieces and tell me whether they're red, yellow, or green. In my mind, I kind of try to make it simple. Are there any that you would caution us about that you're worried coming in? I'm hearing there's no red. I think you're telling us there's a couple of yellows, but you're trying to mitigate those and take a different path, and that you believe most of the project is on green. Can you articulate that for me?
The overall is actually red right now, and it's mainly because of where we're at and the time frame left. And it's all in those metrics on how you determine, and you've seen these green, yellow, or red, that if you have so many of these, right now there's 5 risks that they remain, like UAT is one of the risks. And currently, I mean, again, we're 65%, and that one's hard to justify on 65% exactly in there, just for the fact that all of our requirements are not created equal. Talking to Kathy, the easiest way to explain some of these is if you have a cell phone and the earbuds that go with the cell phone, and both of those are requirements. The phone itself that has a large functionality, if it passed, that's a pass. And then if you have the earbuds and they work, they're also a pass. But if you look at the two of them, one of them has a much higher functionality than the other. And in that 65% metric doesn't really account for the overall health of the project. As a group, as an executive group, we've looked at these, and could we downgrade some of these for the sake of getting out of red? Sure, we could. When you keep it up there, do things get done faster? Sure. Yes, they do. So I think as a group, we've pushed to be as honest as we can this go around with what color we're at. And if we could move it down, we would. It's just, there's enough, I mean, even having an understanding of the program that is, or the functionality of the program that is there, and knowing that it provides the need on go live currently right now. I mean, you can get into the system and basically do everything that we need to do as an agency to sell our products, but it's not perfect. Therefore, and with that short amount of time frame left, I really don't care for it to get out of red, because I want things to continually to move and get as good as it can by go live date.
Okay. With regard to the reference to production image, so maybe you could simplify it. All hardware in, all legacy data converted and loaded, tested, verified, and what you're in the, and all software loaded, and you're just in the aspect of testing the functionality. I just want to, is the conversion, in essence, the conversion is complete. Legacy data all loaded.
Yeah, and you're kind of talking about two different things. So the image itself is just what we load onto the computer that or the POS, whether it's issuer manager, field manager, or whatever. And then it has the icons that you go in and select to do whatever type of business you're going to do. Where you're talking about the data transfer, you're more talking about the cutover. And what Active has been doing, and I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but what they've been doing, and they're actually on the second round of testing already, but they'll take little chunks of data and then throw them over into a test environment, and then run tests on that to ensure the amount of errors. And I can't give that exact number. Maybe I've heard that the number is very, very small in the realm of bytes, and however that, I don't really speak that language, but I've heard those tests have been very good. So they continually do that, and they continue to get ready on their side by putting those chunks of data over there to get ready for that cutover period. And again, I mean, this is most of what I was going to speak on later, but what tends to happen then is when the system shuts off on January 1 at close of business, our legacy system, that's when all these other processes start working and that data starts flowing over. They've mapped that out. They've done tests on how long it takes for that data to transfer over. So that's where we build that cutover plan. That is a minute-by-minute plan that takes us from shutting off TLS to turning the switch on and being able to sell license passes and making reservations and retail and all those. Hopefully that answered.
I think so. I mean, typically, and I don't want to get too into the weeds on the details of this. There's some data that's, I'll call it, requires conversion before cutover. Any of that, is all that complete?
I'm sorry?
Any data that required conversion, manipulation of some kind of modification for the new system, and is that tested and complete, is one question that I had.
It could be course data, it could be TLS data, it could...
Gentlemen, would you mind coming up to the podium just so we can get the recording? I'm happy to have.
You guys want to just go into yours?
Yeah, we're Bill Joplin again. We actually will cover a lot of this, intended to cover some of the details associated with, you know, things like data migration, all the stuff that's been going on actually since late September, while we're finishing up, as we were finishing up the entire cutover plan. So we'll go ahead and talk about a couple of things that we've been doing and why we should have some confidence, similar to what Corey was saying, and then we'll go into...
Gentlemen, would you mind just telling, we of course know who you are, but just for the record,
yes.
If you could introduce...
So, yeah, we'll start with that. So good morning, Director Broscheid, Commissioner Howard, and Commission. I'm Gary Evans. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Reserve America Outdoors, formerly Active Network. This is Bill Joplin. He's the Vice President of Client Services. So, sorry about that. So, we like to audible here. We're very flexible with that. One of the things I want to start off and say, every day we get a clear path in feeling about go live, right? I mean, we have no less on my calendar than 15 or 20 calls per week internally, and there's another 10 or so between CPW and Active on multiple levels. So the transparency and the communication as far as the two teams working together is like never before. It's not where it was. It's way better than it was a year ago. And certainly better than a year before that. And so when we talk to you guys about our confidence in go live, it's hard to put it in the percentage complete on some of these things. I've done personally since I've been part of this organization about 50 of these, 50 major system conversions. And we have a team that has that level of experience as well. And open communication and dialogue is key, and it often supersedes any kind of scoring of metrics of complete and whatnot. So when Corey talks about the deployment of terminals, we've taken an extremely conservative approach when we've gone to this to make sure that, you know, we're not marking it as 100% complete until we're all in agreement that it's 100% complete. And so sometimes we maybe err on the side of caution with that. So that's what you're seeing in that. The other thing, you know, like I would say is that, you know, we have learned, and I'll go through this, through all of ours, yeah, okay, good. We've learned a ton of lessons with these go lives, right? And so we've done a number of these, and while you guys are at the more complex end of this, we can still apply some of the lessons that we've done from our go lives to others. So, and this presentation was in response to, I think, comments in the past is, well, how are you so confident this time that you guys can go live when, you know, you've been confident in the past, right? So we wanted to kind of be transparent about some of our lessons learned and what we're doing about it. So the first thing I would say is with the testing, you know, we learned versus the scheduled go live and our performance up to that, you know, around a year and a half ago, is that on-site support is the most effective. So we've spent in the last 6 months hundreds upon hundreds of on-site hours working directly with you guys, looking at the same screens, going through the same test data, going through use cases and saying, okay, does it have to be that way? Looking at the legacy systems that we have and ensuring that we're on the same page between the two teams. That is something that we've really focused on doing this time to ensure that we're on the same page when we know what our result needs to be in this new system. And that requires, you know, demos going back and forth between the teams. We've looked at all of your legacy systems. You've looked at the iterations in AWO. In some cases, that's come back, and you've said that's not good enough. And we've gone back and started to bring our product people back through, you know, reprogram those things, and those results will show here in the next few weeks as we get those things tested and completed for go live. Every day, we are meeting with you guys from a project team level on any blockers that are out there. And when we talk about blockers, I think Corey's talked about it in the past, is what's the end user experience going to be like? All right, so we want to make sure that when we turn this thing up, that there's not major issues that would cause backlash and get, you know, reports to you guys. So we take that focus. There's also the RTM focus, right? Making sure that we've done all of the requirements in the RFP and we're tracking that, and that's what you're seeing on the other sheet. But we're also taking the end user experience focus into account, making sure that when the public sees this and the license agent see this and the field sees this, that it's as smooth of a transition as possible. So that's our focus as well. With the equipment and fulfillment, which is a huge piece of this, one of the things that we've learned in Kansas is that we want to go out and pilot that. So we have a pilot group that we're working on right now to go out and test this rather than deploying all these things at once, making sure that we've worked through any of the bugs. Again, we've already done this deployment in Kansas, so we've learned a lot of those lessons. But again, we want to make sure that if there's anything unique and specific to Colorado that comes out, that we pull that out because of the pilot that we do. The other thing is that instead of dealing with the individual license agents, we're working with the corporate IT. In some cases, when you're dealing with Walmart and whatnot, there are all kinds of network protocols and whatnot that you have to go through to make sure that your AWO instance is talking directly to our, you know, central office, right? So I think that that's really key for us. It helps us deal with some of the issues more quickly, and you know, that's one of the lessons that we learned last time as well. Also, you know, from an active standpoint, we are more the single point of ownership of this, so we do have third parties that help us deploy this equipment. I think better than ever before, we're micromanaging those folks, making sure that we're getting a high-quality image out to the license agents. All of that stuff is being checked off. Because of our reorganization that we've talked about last time, the reporting structures of our business have been modified so that we're way more responsive than we were in the past with this. So a lot of the PMO office, the professional services, configuration people report up to me. We've got the equipment folks report up to Steve Wade, who is our CTO. So we're constantly on the same page of anything that might happen that would cause any kind of a delay or impact to go live. When it comes to the training, and the training folks work with me as well, we really, I think this is so critical and often misunderstood. This is probably one of the key things that really impact the field's or license agents' first 30 days impression of the system. That training is so critical for their comfort level on the system and their satisfaction. And so we've done a ton of focus on this. CPW signed off in the training and the plan for training well in advance of us doing this, but we're still making little tweaks along the way. Every day that we do a training, and we've started it this week, we get surveys back from the class. If there are comments about maybe the flow of training or things that we should have covered a little bit differently, we're making corrections on the fly if we feel like people need to get a little bit better information on that. There's an unbelievable focus on training. And again, we review this every single day. For the go live, again, one of the key things, we've got 750 tasks just on the cutover plan. And that is multi-department. It's going to be extremely well coordinated from our project management office in conjunction with CPW. And this is your question on data. So we've already done one run of migration of test data. The second run is in progress. We may likely do another one just to ensure that goes as smooth as possible, because that's absolutely critical to this, right? So we can't have any mistakes on that. So even if the second run is perfect, we still may do a third one just to make sure that we're completely confident in that. And then, of course, then we'll work towards the final migration for the go live. So, and there's a multiple numbers of checkpoints that you can do to ensure we check the numbers of, entries in the file. We do spot checks of the data. There's all kinds of layers that we put on this to ensure that that's right. And that's something that we've done through these conversions on the licensing side, in AWO at least 5 times we've done this for huge databases. So we're comfortable with that. And then, that all leads up to the final cutover starting on the 1st. And then with that, we have a number of people that are looking around the clock on anything that might happen in that time frame to ensure that we've got, complete attention on any hiccups that might happen or whatnot, so that we can respond to it. Again, our folks are used to this. They're used to being able to make changes on the fly, and having, an all-hands-on-deck approach is going to make sure that we're in a comfortable place for that. And then from operational support, the key thing, again, is we will have folks who are on site here, and it won't just be for go live, it'll be for weeks after that. That's one of the things I think, we talked about in Kansas a bit. We could have spent a little bit more time with Kansas for weeks after the go live, working hand in hand with you guys to deal with customer issues or license agent issues or field issues as they come up. More easily fixed when you guys are working together in the same place, looking at the same screens and whatnot. So you guys will have all the phone numbers. We'll have 24/7 support, not just for the consumers, but for the agents in the field as well. We will have, I'll ensure, and all these folks now report up through me as well, we'll have double or close to triple the staff on in case we have additional calls, because there's always training questions that happen during this go-live period. So we'll have an all-hands-on-deck approach for that as well. And then, again, I think the key is that as that happens, we will have, when we do this, we have huge conference calls with senior leaders from all the teams on, and if there is an escalated issue, you've got escalated priority on it. From a company standpoint, and we are a large company, 1,000 people strong, this will be our undivided attention when we turn up this switch on the go live and for a period after until we're comfortable that it's running correctly. Any questions?
Yeah, could I just follow up on that? So that's great. I'm just trying to picture that first day, and you've kind of told us about your staffing and how you plan for that first day. Where will our folks be on that first day, CPW staff? I'm just trying to see the integration between the two teams.
So pretty much about 100% of employees, both on the CPW side, they already mentioned the active side, but also OIT, will be either 24/7, and we make jokes now, but we're probably going to have cots in the office. I can't remember who I was talking to, but it's kind of like the Y2K when
Exactly.
folks were staying in the office. That's exactly what we're going to be doing. We need to be able to respond immediately if active needs us to run in and check something, or vice versa. Same with OIT. So as far as my staff, and we've already talked about it, it's in the works for making a good plan, but until the system comes on and stabilizes, it's 24/7, either on site or on call. So.
And can you talk then, let's assume for a moment that we have a successful launch. So typical problems that are able to be dealt with, but it's a successful launch. Tell us about what the next month or two looks like as there's a new system out there, we've launched it successfully, but now we've got to get users comfortable with it. How does that look? Do you have like special teams? I know Commissioner McDaniels and I chatted about this, and oftentimes there's a special customer service team in those following months. Talk a little bit about that. What do those months look like?
And on our side, we're trying to catch as much as that as we can up front. So we are again, currently right now running training sessions. We've ran 2 this week. We got 2 under our belt. Of course, the second one went better than the first one, and hopefully they progress and get better as we go through the field, or all the staff. We're also doing specialized training with certain sections that require more specialized training in certain areas of this program, whether they're, they mainly handle reservations and they really need to understand all capacities of reservations, to where other sections may only need to know that it's there. So there's numerous trainings as it relates to that prior to. After the fact, there's also WebExes set up that any of these trainings that we've given, at any time someone can go into there and refresh and take that. And then, of course, my staff, and a lot of the testers. There was over 80 testers that helped test this. I would probably claim most of them to be SMEs at this point. But amongst that core group, of course, I think those are the ones that we lean on as an agency. And again, going back to my staff, I expect mine to be SMEs. We've already gone through the training ourselves. So as much as we can, try to incorporate more training, even after the fact. I have, and you met Devin Adams last meeting. She's actually going to every single one of these trainings and making sure that when Active is given these, they're following our business rules. She's there to answer any questions that she can. That will, and we've discussed it a little bit, that will probably need to continue a little bit, that we're keeping a close eye on this, and being able to be responsive and as far as that training goes, in keeping people up to speed. Because when you talk about that first month, I actually look at more the first year, because the system will change over that year. There's going to be things that we get into and we sit there and go, we didn't even think about that. It shouldn't do that. It needs to do this. So we're going to go in, we'll make a change request. That's going to require new training. In each one of these, some of these, each time one of these rolls out, we will need to retrain on some of these. And some of that's just by email. You're used to clicking this button, now you have to look on the left side of the screen, the button's over here. Some of these things might be in more detail that require us to do some more, I mean, a full WebEx or something like that, or maybe even some on-site training. But
Commissioner Daniel, did you get your questions answered?
I did, although I have a couple more now.
Please, please.
One is more of a comment, and I think sounds like an excellent plan in terms of customer service and what you're carrying forward. I would highly encourage you to take those 80 SMEs and make them super users at least for a year to be that network out there. But a couple quick questions. One was cybersecurity in terms of the testing of the entry points, applications, how people access it and so forth. Obviously, this is a new application. Did you all do that yourself in terms of certified? Did you use a external
Yeah,
firm?
we're PCI level 1, and you're actually going on to a product that that currently exists, right? So this product, even though the build is for CPW and we've customized the system for you, you are on a product called ActiveWorks Outdoors, which is currently used in 32 states, state park systems, and as well as several other licensing systems across North America, including Kansas. So if there's a security problem, it impacts, you know, I think we have close to 60% of the public parks market transacting through that system. So if there's an issue, we've got a really big issue. So we have a dedicated security team and constantly monitoring the newest, you know, threats and, you know, intrusion issues. We're PCI level 1. We have a, you know, a tier 3+ data centers completely locked down. Our primary one where this is in Las Vegas. I can't even get into the data center without special access and permission. I mean, so we take security, and we can go through what our security protocols are in more detail, you know, if you want to, but we take it to the utmost regard because we have basically staked everything on that, right? I mean, if we're in the papers, that's a big problem for us.
No, we just talked a lot about the application, but we've never mentioned, or at least that I'm aware of, or talked about cybersecurity and obviously how important it is.
Yeah.
Aspect of it in terms of the architecture of the system itself and the operation. So I appreciate that feedback about it.
I wanted to also add to something that Corey said, just some of the things that we do for Go Live. So you go live and, you know, things are transacting, everybody's happy, and I just want you guys to know we don't, you know, consider that success yet. We monitor all kinds of channels to ensure that the feedback and the satisfaction levels are increasing and where we want them to be. So we'll monitor phone calls that come in. We'll monitor the case logs that come in, you know, for weeks to see trends. We have ways to do outreach and customer satisfaction. I'll troll social media. That's a good way for us to look and see what the feedback is. And so as those things come up, we look for trends, and if it's something that looks like it could be an urgent situation, we're completely all over it and send alarms to the organization. So like I said, if it's a quiet go live, just know that we're not resting. We're looking for issues to make sure that the transition's smooth.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? I just finished in on my side of it. I mean, to me, we talk a lot about this project as the way IT projects are talked about, you know, which is getting it done correctly. It's really a strategic moment for us. It's way beyond the system going in. And so that, to me, is why that first year is so important, because we want all of our users to feel like this is a great thing, that we have responded to their concerns to be more competitive, because I can say our system is not as competitive as some of the other states. And so this is a huge business marketing event for us. And so keeping the eye on the ball this next year is really important. So appreciate the update.
Thank you.
I'll just finish with, I'm very confident because I got my Saskatchewan license and there on the top of the envelope, it said Active Network. So I know they have systems that work.
And that is ActiveWorks Outdoors, so that's the platform. So
Great, thank you very much.
thank you.
Came in the mail, too. Just like, just like us. Can't print it. Okay, so next up is Tyler Seawald, Acting Park Manager with our Jackson. Oh, we've got more to come. More to come on iPause agents. Okay, sorry. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, I got it.
All right. Great.
Good morning, Commissioners. Chairman Howard, Director Broscheid. Just wanted to give you a brief overview. My name is Paul Wolf. I'm the agent coordinator. And so I've been overseeing the implementation of the iPOS machines, the POS terminals, in all of the sales locations. And so just wanted to give you a quick overview of what the implementation process looked like from the sales agent perspective. So to get started, just to give you a general idea of the numbers that we were looking at, we have 65 Parks and Wildlife offices. We have roughly 600 TLS agents, so those are the license agents that we've had that only sold hunting and fishing licenses, and then we had 13 agents that sold park passes only. So combined, that puts us roughly 650 agents overall that are going to be getting the new hardware, the new equipment, come the first of the year. And I've actually had been pretty fortunate. The presenters before me have kind of done a lot of the heavy lifting here for me, so a lot of the questions have been answered. But just to recap, regarding the pilot program, I've been in direct contact with 4 local metro area agents, and they actually have the equipment in their shops right now. They've gone through and done some testing for us. They've tested the user guide, the installation guide, so they've actually gotten the box. They've opened up the box. They've gone through the instruction manual, the implementation guide. They have assembled the equipment all on their own, and they have gone in and fired up the equipment, made sure it connected to their networks, and they've gone in and tested the image. So they've clicked on all of the buttons, made sure everything is executable and actionable, and make sure there's no network issues with their particular locations. So far, I've heard from each and every one of the agents that we've had. We chose a Walmart, we chose a Dick's Sporting Goods, and then we've kind of chosen some of the smaller ma and pa agents, if you will. So one of the agents got our test results back right away. Everything tested out just fine. There were no issues with the implementation. There were no issues with the image. Everything was executable and actionable as far as all the icons on the screen. So everything went really well as far as that was concerned. We heard back from another one of our agents. Same thing, everything looked good. So just to kind of speak to the confidence level that Gary mentioned, it looks like everything from that perspective is working out really well. Regarding the lessons learned from the Kansas implementation, working with Walmarts and getting them on board at this stage of the game has been very beneficial. We've been able to identify certain challenges that exist with their network and our network and or Active's network, and have things in the work to get those issues resolved. So like I said, all the agents received their equipment last week, so things are in progress there. The pilot testing portion here is to be completed by the end of this month, and as of right now, everything appears to be on schedule for that. That leads into the initial equipment rollout. So we've earlier in the year gone through the process of getting new agent agreements from our agents and having them send those back to us. So of those 650 agents that we have, we've received roughly 500 agreements back. So those are the agents who are eligible to receive the new equipment, and the implementation process is going to be basically the entire month of December, so a good Christmas present for our agents. And the strategy there from Active perspective is roughly 225 per week over a 3-week period, pretty much leading up to Christmas Eve. And so that appears to be still on track. Everything looks good for that. Once those agents do get their equipment, there is some training that they're going to go through from Active's side and from CPW's side. So from Active's perspective, they will be watching a brain shark video. And so we, CPW and Active, have worked together to customize that video, some of the talking points, some of the text that they're going to see on the screen. It really takes them through step by step. How do you load the paper? How do you run through basic transactions? How do you void licenses, et cetera? And so we've gone through and worked with Active to customize that so that it is a little bit more relevant to what they're actually going to see and what they're used to. I briefly mentioned the user guide, so that's going to be another point of training for them. It's going to go through and walk them through transactions and how to void a license and any of those rules that are tied in with that. And then they'll also have access to to Active's help desk. So a lot of these things are in place already, so it's things that they're used to. It's just a different machine for the most part. So they're used to calling the help desk, so a lot of those things are already in place, and so that's good. The more comfortability and familiarity they can have, I think the better. And then from our side, we have an agent test. I would say, it would be my desire to get to each and every one of these locations all throughout the state. I think that'd be a lot of fun, but Corey won't let me. We have to have some way of getting these folks into the materials that we have, whether it is the agent manual that actually walks them through a lot of our business rules on how to process transactions, or whether it's the posters or placards or the brochures, et cetera. So we've designed an agent test that we've been using for years with a lot of success, that essentially just forces them to look through the materials so that in the event that they cannot get a hold of us, they have an idea of where that information lives so that they can find it and get some questions answered. We have, during normal business hours, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, we have an 800 number that they can call, comes directly into our shop. They'll either speak with me or 3 other people, and they can get questions answered on business rules, things of that nature. So again, mentioned all of the training materials that we have for the agents, and those things will remain in place. And then, as was discussed earlier for Go Live, last year I was the draw coordinator, so I'm no stranger to spending the night at the office. So we will be on hand 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or on call some way, shape, or form. This will have our full and undivided attention for sure. The blackout dates that are going to occur during the cutover are going to be communicated to the license agents so that they know during those periods of times there's no way for them to sell any licenses to the public, and they can communicate that to the public. Those dates have been communicated and will continue to be communicated on our website through the POS machines currently. So the legacy system has the ability to send a broadcast message to those folks, so it pops up on their screen right away that there's a message. They can access that message and see that there are going to be blackout dates involved. And then we also send a monthly agent bulletin, and that will discuss the blackout dates as well. So that's pretty much it for me. Any questions?
Commissioner Zip.
Yes, sir.
What's the approximate number of blackout days expected?
It's going to be on the 2nd and 3rd of January, so those 2 days.
It's 2 days.
Correct.
Okay. And the Brian Shark video, how is that going to be made available?
There is a URL, so when they get their bundle of equipment, there's going to be a letter in there that has a URL that they'll actually plug in, and that'll take them right to the Brain Shark video.
Great. And then one final thing, just curious, are we able to get any credit for all the old terminals, or what's going to happen with all the old equipment?
Well, when the new equipment comes, it's going to come with shipping tags inside. So in terms of getting it sent back, that's how that will work. In terms of getting credit, I don't know that there's anything like that in place, but that's my understanding of the situation.
Yeah, just curious what CPW as an organization is going to do with all that old equipment.
Active owns that equipment, or RA Outdoors owns that equipment, so it goes back. When it gets shipped back, it goes back to them.
Okay. Any changes expected on the requirements for the surety bond that the agents are required to carry?
We'll be running audits, and of course, Paul runs that side of as part of his job. But because it could, that's been a question we've asked, because, for instance, if you have just sold licenses and now you potentially sell licenses and passes, that of course could change. I don't think it's going to be huge by any means. I mean, there could be some that get adjusted a little, but I don't see any being great changes by any means.
Thanks.
Okay.
Questions or comments? How are the agents reacting to this? Are they excited? It's a hassle, or how? I mean, what's the general reaction?
I think it's a little bit of both, and it probably depends on who you talk to. I think that old antiquated equipment, as much as we would want to get rid of it, I think agents would like to get rid of it. The user ability and how friendly the new system is, it might take them a week or two, but I think once they get into it and realize how easy it is to use, they'll probably ask why we didn't do this a while ago. The ones that are that have at least an issue right now, it more revolves around timing, not the machines itself. And we've heard a little bit because of the size, but I think more and more we're hearing more that it's revolving around the time frame of the year, and it's tough, because I think from a business perspective we have to take our business in account, and we're right there around Christmas, New Year's. So I mean, it's tough, and we're working with them, but it's kind of is what it is.
Well, it's an important partner group, so.
It is, yeah.
Well, thanks very much for all of you, and thanks for coming out to Yuma.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I haven't messed up the agenda for a second time, now Tyler Seawald,
You can leave that up there.
Acting Park Manager, will give us a Jackson Lake update.
Thank you.
All right, Chairman Howard and Commissioners, it's nice to meet you guys. I don't think I've been to a meeting recently. And then Director Broscheid, good to see you again. I'm Tyler Seawald. I'm the Senior Ranger at Jackson Lake. As Chairman Howard said, I'm the Acting Park Manager. Brad Jackson was a Park Manager. He left after 27 years, so I think it was convenient. He left 2 weeks ago, right before this, and then it's ended up on my lap. So this is actually a good opportunity for us. We're one of the few parks out on the Eastern Plains. We don't, I think we get overlooked sometimes by the public. People don't look to us as a big recreation area sometimes, but we'll take this opportunity to brag a little bit about what we're doing. Mark Leslie, he gave us a chance to put this PowerPoint together, and when we did, he said he wanted challenges and opportunities to be expressed through our slides. And so when I thought about that, I thought, well, those are kind of one and the same. So this was pretty easy. It was more or less a problem of minimizing what we were going to talk about. Because we do have a lot of challenges, we do have a lot of opportunities, but they do go hand in hand. And so as we go through this, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in and ask. I'm not opposed to being interrupted. So just to give you a quick idea of Jackson Lake, if you haven't been there, we're in the northwest corner of Morgan County, so we're a little over an hour from here. We do serve, of course, the whole state, but more detailed, we support 3 different towns and communities, Goodrich, Orchard, and Waldona. So kind of a unique area, pretty blue-collar, hardworking community, and people do use the park pretty frequently. But then we also get a lot of visitors from the North Range, or North Front Range, from Fort Collins down to North Denver typically is our most of our visitors. So first thing I'd like to talk about is just some of our connections to our community. Like I said, we do serve that community out there. Morgan County has a lot of limited resources. Fire department's fairly limited, law enforcement's limited, and you know, in return, like I said, a lot of people work very hard for a living, so getting volunteers is difficult. So sometimes we have to go to the people off park to kind of reach out to them, and we have a lot of different ways that we're doing that, and we're getting more and more creative in doing that. I'll just give you a couple examples here. This one on the left, this photo on the left is kind of a cool program that we started doing a couple of years back, working with the CSU Extension Office, and what they were doing is offering a safety day to every 4th and 5th grader in the county, and they do that every other year. And what we were asked to do is if we could present water safety stuff to every 4th and 5th grader in the county. So we hit every school during that time. It's a pretty busy couple of weeks for us, and we meet 1,000 kids or so. And the reason we do that is because a lot of these kids live on farms. They live around ditches, irrigation ponds, and then some of them do come to the lake, but most of that's for farm safety more than anything. So kind of a unique way to get a hold of them and get our message across. This one on the right is called the Golden Stars Program. The Sheriff's Office coordinates this, and what they do is they take in a donation of gifts each year, and they fill a warehouse with kids' gifts. And then residents and anybody can nominate a family or a kid for a gift for Christmas time. So what we do is we take our trucks down there and we help distribute those gifts the week before Christmas. In this case, this was last year's photo. The 3 of us took the west half of the county, and then we had about 30 or 40 volunteers that took the east half of the county. So they covered all of Fort Morgan, Brush, and most of the denser populated areas. The gifts that we delivered were pretty far and few between, a lot of farms and places out in the middle of nowhere. We did go to a lot of dairies, and that was kind of an eye-opening day for us. And like I said, we reach out to our community, but to actually go to their home and to see kind of the extreme poverty, I guess, in some of those places was shocking, I think, to all of us. But that was a fun day, and we see a lot of those families around now. So. We do have a lot of other programs. We ran a fishing clinic each year. This year we ran one in our inlet, stocked it with trout, and had a couple hundred kids come out and catch fish for the day and take home a fishing pole. So a lot of other different programs, but those are kind of our main ones. We do have a lot of aging infrastructure in the park. This is one example. This is a Cove Campground building. It's a shower house and bathroom. It's probably our oldest building. It was built in the 60s, probably around the time that the park had opened. This is not super uncommon for us, but we do have just a lot of aging electrical lines that when they were put in weren't made to accommodate these bigger campers that have multiple kitchens, TVs, air conditioners, and these bathroom buildings weren't set up to accommodate the huge influxes of visitors that we receive on weekends. So something that we're going to have to look forward to in the future is probably updating some of these buildings, maybe eliminating them or replacing them with something different. Same with our electrical lines, and then our water lines are kind of in the same position as that. We're doing a lot of repairs on those, and in some places we're probably going to have to do a complete reinstall in some areas. So Jackson Lake on weekends between Memorial Day and Labor Day does become the 3rd largest town in the county right now. I think that's going to change. We'll probably become the 4th largest town on weekends in the summer. That's because Wiggins, which is our nearest major town, has a lot of new development coming up. They're building 287 new homes. I don't know how many they have in now, but they are expecting to double in size within the next year. So we'll see a lot more visitors coming up from Wiggins and some more local residents. Immediately around the park, we have some new residential areas going in. Right now, they're all summer homes and temporary. I think that'll probably change over the next 10, 20 years. I think you'll see a lot more full-time residents and bigger homes going in there. The photo on the right, this is taken right off the interstate off of I-76 and Highway 39. This field is actually proposed to, you can see a truck stop back there. That's the Stubbs gas station. Right across from that, the land is for sale, and they're proposing putting in a hotel, fast food, and another truck stop. So again, we'll see probably a lot more people come off the interstate staying overnight throughout the year, not just in the summertime as much. Our forestry project sounds kind of weird on the Eastern Plains, but we do have a lot of trees in the park. A majority of them are Russian olive trees. So in the last month or two, we have started to do an evaluation on all of our trees. The State Forest Service is going to come out and start actually probably this week or next week, and they're going to start doing a count and an inventory of every single tree in the park. Doing a walkthrough with those guys, we've kind of already identified some areas like this area here in our Pelican campground. There's campsites all around these trees, and what's happened is a lot of this brush has grown up in these dense tree areas, and tumbleweeds have blown in and packed into. So some of these areas are more of a safety issue. We're kind of afraid if a fire takes off in them that we won't be able to stop it. So the idea is that we're going to work with we have a plan in place for the spring to run some fire through these areas when nobody's in the campgrounds and try to burn off some of that, and then that way we can get in and thin some of these areas out. So we're that's preliminary, and then long term is work on a 10-year project to start a nursery and then start doing some tree plantings and kind of phase out the Russian olives and work towards something that's a little more sustainable and easier to maintain. So that's where we're at, and hopefully we'll see some of those big changes starting this spring when we get some work crews in there. Minimum wage increase has kind of hit us hard this year. We eliminated 4 positions, and this year we're going to eliminate 2 to 3 more. So we typically run a staff of about 21 or 22 seasonal employees. So that hit us pretty hard. We lost those 4 positions that we cut this year were all of our maintenance staff, and then the rangers that you see in this picture, they picked up that role, and so now they're doing double duty. It's actually worked out pretty well, and it's actually something we maybe should have done earlier. So I think the challenge of having that was a benefit long term, but this next year is going to be more of a challenge because now we're kind of stretching a little thinner, and those aren't as easy to make. We're probably going to make those with our entrance staff employees and probably our boat inspectors. So, and again, that minimum wage will go up again the year after. We've been looking that far out. We don't really have any solution to that yet. This is a good opportunity for us. The Jackson Lake Irrigation Company is looking at doing some lake dredging, and we don't have a timeline on that I'm aware of. We've had meetings and discussions about how they want to do that and what they want to do. They're still working on funding to get this done. The idea would be the dry portion that you see in this photo on the left would be to start dredging that area out and to make the water that's at Deadpool more accessible in the summertime. The problem that's going to have for us is that we have a really good fishery right now because of that Deadpool, is that if they can't draw that water out, we keep a lot of good fish in the lake year to year. So that's something we'll probably need to discuss with Mark and probably the commission and other people is if we shouldn't be more involved in that and maybe create a conservation pool and keep our fisheries going well each year. So like I said, we're kind of waiting to hear back from them. They're getting their surveys and they're looking at funding options right now. And that's most of what I have. Right now, just for a ballpark for you guys, we do see about 170 to 190,000 visitors a year, and then our revenue's sitting just under 800,000 a year. So we do see quite a bit in our summer months. So.
Great. Questions from commissioners? I have one. How is the relationship then with the irrigation district?
It's about as good as it could be. They really are pretty hands-off with the park, unless it's something that affects them with, anything with the lake management and water levels. But outside of that, we have a really good relationship with them. So
great.
Yeah, Yeah, they really haven't, I can't think of, in 10 years that I've been there, I haven't seen them challenge us or been difficult in any way, so very good.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for, oh, sorry, Commissioner Zimmer, I apologize.
Thanks so much for giving us this presentation, taking the time out of your day. You're right, a lot of the Eastern Plains, especially some of these get overlooked. Do you think you were saying at the intersection, you're seeing another gas station, probably some fast food, maybe even a hotel lodging. Do you see opportunities, I guess, for marketing outreach for those that are coming through to maybe they need a place to walk their dog or exercise, or they're going to camp instead of pay for a hotel? So is that part of the growth that you're
Yeah, I
projecting?
think right now what we're seeing is most of our visitors stay overnight. Most of them are staying typically from like Thursday or Friday night through Sunday night. I think we'll start to see that change. I think you'll see people starting coming in more through Monday through Thursday, just with interstate traffic. And then I think you'll see a lot more day use. And that's one thing we don't see a lot of, because we have 260 campsites, so a majority of the park is built around campsites. The day use has been pretty limited. We see some on Sundays, and that's typically the only day that we see a big increase. So I think we'll be kind of seen as a rest stop. The only limiting factor is we're 10 miles off the interstate, so it's whether or not they'll want to make the jaunt up there. But
How do people currently find, I mean, is it just kind of Google, or how do people typically hear about
I think typically Google, I think word of mouth has been big, and what you find is a lot of our visitors have been coming for generations. Most of them talk about that when they used to come out as kids or with their grandparents or parents, is that they used to park around the shoreline. There weren't campsites. You'd throw a tent up and just stay wherever you were, and there was no permitting. And so I think a lot of these people have been coming for, longer than the park has been around. So I think it's word of mouth. All right.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next on our agenda is the consent agenda, and Commissioner Bray has been kind enough to let me know that he has one item that he would like to discuss, but not at least initially take off the agenda, as I understand it, which the rules do provide for, I notice.
Yes, I would like further discussion on issues identification 30.4. It's informational, but there's several there that typically we go through in most meetings, and they're not in the consent agenda, but there's a couple here that I would like to have a little clarification if we could. And if you'd like me to identify, particularly the one, and I have spoken with Pat Dorsey on this issue, but it's a bullet point down there, changing all either sex muzzleloader and first rifle elk licenses in GMU 71, 72, 73, etc. to antlered or antlerless licenses. I'd like to have a discussion on that issue, please.
Danielle?
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Danielle Eisenhart, Regulations Manager for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So the particular issue paper that Commissioner Bray has questions on is on page 20 of the consent agenda topic, which is yellow in color. This issue paper proposes, again, changing either sex rifle and muzzleloader elk licenses in GMUs 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 77, 78, 711, 741, 751, and 711 to bull and cow only licenses. This issue paper is proposing to make all either sex rifle and muzzleloader elk licenses in elk DAUs E24 minus Unit 70, and then DAU E30 and E31 bull or cow only due to concerns with the population size and too much cow harvest. Either sex rifle and muzzleloader licenses contribute to a significant portion of cow harvest in these units. If either sex licenses remain in place, staff feels that they will need to be reduced in number to minimize the female harvest, which in turn will decrease the number of licenses that are available. Also, cow-calf recruitment has been low in these units as well. So therefore, this issue paper is recommending as the preferred alternative to eliminate all the either sex muzzleloader and either sex first rifle hunt codes in those DAUs and changing them to bull only or cow only hunt codes as listed in the issue paper.
Commissioner Bray?
Thank you. Okay, I don't disagree with anything that's said in the issue paper. In fact, I've been preaching for 2 or 3 years that in my opinion, we've been overkilling cows in this region. My question is, are we still having a late season cow hunt in these units?
Thanks, Pat.
Sorry. Pat Dorsey, Southwest Region Manager. And Commissioner Bray, I don't know that answer, and what I would propose to you is that I come back to the next meeting with a full list of where we have those late season hunts. If I understand your concern, it's that we should eliminate the hunts where we're killing the majority of the cows first, rather than eliminating opportunity in an area where we may not be killing that many cows.
That's exactly my concern.
Okay.
The muzzleloading and first rifle season are either sex licenses, which are very popular, and quite frankly, I don't think we kill that many cows in those units. Now, if this is the last step, I would agree with it, but if we're still having late season cow hunts in these units, those are the ones that need to be curtailed before we go to this route. And so that's my concern.
And I will bring that.
My unit's right next to these. And I know, for example, we have a December cow elk hunt that has 250 licenses in it. Most of them are PLO, which I love PLO licenses. But that's a lot of licenses. And I know also when the leftover draw starts, we have all these applications for these cow licenses, and they're all filled, and then the leftover list comes out, and we have, in most cases, a couple hundred or more leftover licenses. And by the time the season starts, they're all sold. But those are the ones, quite frankly, I think you need to curtail before you go to curtailing the applicant that applies up front.
And I know that in these units, we have been cutting way back on cow licenses. I believe the area saw this as the last step, but I don't have the information that you're asking for. So I'd be happy to provide that at the next meeting if that doesn't put us in a bind with respect to the regulations. And so I'll ask, we could pull it at draft if there's still a concern.
So typically we try to approve all of these issue papers in January so that we have the brochure up to date when it goes out to press with all the correct season dates and units listed in there. I can go through the issue papers again and make sure that there's not an issue paper requesting to remove any of those late seasons, but I don't think that there are. I can also go through what we currently have in those units for late seasons with you as well, since I have those with me today.
Well, we will see this again. I would prefer not to see it in the consent agenda, but more as a focus on it so we can have that discussion. Thank you.
So I would propose then that we take that item off the agenda, if I understand correctly, for discussion at the next meeting.
Yes, I would prefer that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So with that subtraction from the consent agenda, are there any other comments or questions? And the chair would entertain a motion then to approve the consent agenda minus that one item.
I so move.
Great. Pardon me? Pardon me, Adrian? I'm sorry.
Oh, I second it.
Oh, sorry. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Great, motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we've done the officers' elections. So that would mean normally we would have a break, but we obviously have weather on the pass, so I would just propose that if you need a break, head for the restroom, otherwise we'll just bash on. So I believe next up then would be Justin with the CPW budget projections.
Good morning, Commission. My name is Justin Rudder. I'm the Assistant Director for Financial Services. Today, I bring the financial projections to discuss with you today. So I want to first thank Ms. Varney for accommodating my late schedule. We've been working on these projections, well, off and on for 2 years, really, as part of our discussion about financial sustainability. We, as an LT, had a chance to discuss it yesterday, and I thought it was more important to make sure that everybody had a chance to weigh in and discuss rather than make the mailing. So I apologize that you are receiving it in paper copies. We do have a display copy that we can put up on the screens, and it will be on the website. Basically, as starting 2 years ago, the CFO at the time put together a projection of wildlife revenues and fees, and then compared it to expenses as part of our conversation with the legislature on the need for fee increases.
Justin, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Does Commissioner Vigil have access to the? Great, thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Then last year during the conversation with the legislature, again, I added the park side of the equation to the projections, and that has been shared through the financial sustainability outreach and with legislators. We have updated those numbers, we've updated the projections, and I wanted to make sure that there is some context on these discussions as we're going in front of the legislature. There's a memo that does accompany these slides. So what we have in front of you on the screens and in front of you is 4 years of actual data to give kind of a base trend line. And then the first green column there is fiscal year 17-18 forecast, which is kind of the starting point of where our projection goes from. And then the last column there is 8 years out. So there are the other 7 years hidden in that, but in the attempt to make it easier to read and print and display, I've hidden those, but they are available in the online versions. So I think the caveats to this is always that this is kind of a broad look. There's a lot of detail behind even this summary that goes into further detail. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is if your expenses grow faster than your revenues, you're going to have a problem at the end of the day, or at the end of the forecast period. So I think where you start from and what rate you grow at is really the key to these projections. This is not a multi-year, 1,000-hour staff time invested into a planning operation. This is not locking us into any direction for future strategies, but it is our best guess of where we're heading. Within the memo, I lay out some weaknesses, including that one. Also, we are assuming on the wildlife side that the number of licenses we sold in fiscal year 17 was the exact right number and will always be the exact right number to manage herds to objective. That's probably not true. We will see fluctuations. Small fluctuations in elk licenses in particular can have outsized impact on our revenues. It is a key driver to our wildlife revenues. So if we were to see, we were playing with this in the leadership team a little bit, if we just saw a 1% year-over-year decline, even with non-resident CPI, by the end of the forecast period, which is 8 years, we'd see a $5 million decrease annually from just a 1% decline in licenses on elk. So these projections make me nervous, to be honest, because it's what we're going to the legislature, it's what we're talking about, and we're saying if you give us, at the end of this forecast period, if you give us $32 million between the two, we are going to be fine, we're going to be doing everything we want to do, but there are just a number of, we don't know what we don't know, and there's a number of risks within the forecast. We try to build to current law, even when we know that some things may be coming down the pike, such as the para increase that we discussed briefly yesterday. That is not built into these projections because it's not current law. But we do add certain activities and items to our expenditures that we expect to be doing or we believe we should be doing more of over the forecast period. So starting, actually, Adrian, if we could switch to the wildlife tall spreadsheet first. So starting with wildlife, over the projection period, we are estimating that we would grow revenues by $15 million. This, since I just discussed, we're not changing license numbers, we aren't changing fees within the forecast. That is entirely from the 2.3% projected CPI adjustment to non-resident licenses. Moving to federal and state grants, as a whole, CPW anticipates that federal agencies will continue to have budget pressures on the amount that they're able to give to us. However, Pittman Robinson and Dingell Johnson, which are large and currently robust funding sources for us, are on a reimbursement basis. So when we are looking at the actuals to the left, those federal dollars are what we actually expended, although apportionments might be higher. So for the federal revenues, we see growth over the forecast period that's really just us approaching our apportionment that we, so it's assuming that we will get to spending every dollar that we receive every year, essentially. Lottery and GOCO are being held flat. Well, they're starting at a lower amount because they're also reimbursement dollars. I'm growing that amount through the first few years to the current investment plan level, and then assuming that overall revenues for lottery and GOCO will grow by population and that's an assumption that comes up a few times, that some of these things, as more people move to the state, or so a same percentage of those people will buy lottery tickets, lottery draws. So I know that in presentations from the lottery in the past, they've projected declines in revenue. We don't see it in the actuals. We see year-over-year increases. So I did not include a decline in the revenue because I can't justify it. Severance tax is a very volatile stream. In this projection, I'm assuming a full level of Tier 1 on both sides, but a reduced level of Tier 2 to support species conservation and A&S. In discussions yesterday with Director Randall, we're starting to see some actual data from the Department of Revenue that is frankly frightening. I think that our severance tax projections are probably optimistic in this, based on what we've seen for the past 3 months in actuals. And then all of the revenues, which is a smaller portion, are held flat through the forecast period. Should have made a comment earlier about fiscal year 17-18, where we start. For the most part, it's a 2-year or 4-year average. Sometimes we included additional information that we know about what's going on, where we think it is, what was one time, what wasn't, to kind of make our best guess on where those start points should be. Where possible, I used averages, but averages can also be lies. So, for instance, on the park side, if we were to do an average of the last 4 years of camping, we have a growth in camping that's like this, and so I'm saying we should come back here and assume that we're not going to have that kind of, we would not meet fiscal year 17 camping revenues until fiscal year 27, I believe, if I use the average of the last 4 years. So I backed it off to a 2-year average, so I'm not saying we're always going to be at this peak. There's a lot of risks to camping and visitation. There's always bad years, fires, floods that can reduce that. But I'm assuming that we are still going to see a high level of visitation, but I should get back to wildlife. So those kind of assumptions combined assume $15 million over the forecast period in revenue growth. So looking at expenditures, personal services, salaries, and benefits is a major driver of all of our expenses. I'm assuming a 2.32% increase in salaries over the time frame, because that's what we've seen in actual appropriations from the legislature for the last 5 years on average. And it also conveniently matches up to CPI, so it feels like a good assumption that salaries need to grow at cost of living over time. Benefits, I'm projecting 4.5% increase to health, life, dental benefits. That's what Kaiser has found to be true with large employers over the past, I forget how many years. And the wildlife side includes an additional $2.4 million to address Amendment 70, the minimum wage increase. It's a somewhat conservative projection. We know what it will cost to take everybody that's below $12 up to $12. That's an easy calculation. The harder one is if you were hiring a temporary ranger or a temporary wildlife officer at $12 an hour previously and hiring a tech at $9. There's a skill gap difference there. If you're now paying $12 to your lowest skill employee, you might have to pay higher skilled employees more. And that's a hard number to get to, and it can drive a large impact. We looked at both the percentage increase to minimum wage and the dollar increase to minimum wage, and applied that to the rest of our temporary workforce, and then averaged those two analyses. I felt comfortable with that, although I'm not always a big fan of averages. I did feel comfortable with this one in particular because Margaret Taylor has done work on the park side, looking at the kind of what we should pay a gate attendant, what we should pay a Title 33 ranger, and did a similar analysis that got to a similar number on the park side. So I think that coming at it from two different directions, we kind of ended up at a number that may be accurate, but it may be conservative as well. For operating expense.
Justin, can I ask you a question on that? We saw the dynamic at Jackson Lake Park where the minimum wage increase was essentially offset by hiring fewer temporaries, as I understood it. Is that a dynamic that you anticipate going through the organization?
I don't want to speak for the individual managers, but I know that at leadership team, this is a large impact to our method of operation, and we have been discussing ways to get in and assess whether what we've always done is the way we should always do it. Just because we've always used 100 rangers or 100 temps at Pueblo doesn't mean we always need 100 rangers at Pueblo. I will not be part of that analysis. That's more of a operations side, but we are taking a look at changing our methods of operations as opposed to just paying more money.
So fair to say it's a pressure, I guess.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
For operating expenses, we assumed current levels plus inflation over the time period. Grants to others were held largely flat except for a change to what so under grants to others, is where we reflect our third-party conservation easements. Based on the pressures we've been seeing on our RFP program and fee title acquisition, we're assuming that we would do less direct property acquisition going forward and more grants to third parties to hold easements. So there is an increase to that, a significant increase to that line, but it's partially offset by a decrease to capital acquisitions over the time frame. And then also within that subcategory, we're assuming $900,000 of additional investment into essentially the Fishing is Fun program and external shooting ranges at $400,000 and $500,000 respectively, because recruitment and shooting sports are both important topics for us and things that we feel we may invest more in the future. Payments to other agencies, which is largely DPA, EDO, it's our fleet, it's our POTS, it's our legal services. More or less, I'm assuming the same wage inflation at 2.32%. However, the Office of Information Technology charges have doubled over the last 2 years. I don't think we can sustain that sort of growth. I think that we'd become just funding OIT. But I did include 10% increases from that doubled amount going out because we have not seen any indication that costs will slow or reduce. Capital equipment is growing by essentially inflation. Capital improvements envisions a similar size program growing with inflation, but we've added $9.75 million here. And that's for potential dam renovation, dam maintenance, hatchery renovations, and additional internal capital projects. And then lastly, capital acquisitions, as I mentioned previously, we are showing a reduced program on the assumption that we will not be directly acquiring as much property. So then if we could switch over to the park side, please, Adrian. The similar analysis took place. However, the park side is a little more straightforward. License passes, fees, and permits, along with registrations, were started at a 2-year average and then generally expected to keep pace with population. There's probably a different assumption we can make about changing demographics and changing participation in outdoor recreation, but that level of analysis was not, I don't have it on hand, and this is a very broad look, so we assumed that if 10 people move to the state, one of them will recreate, essentially, with just matching our visitation growth to population growth. Federal and state grants are largely held flat. We removed a chunk of revenue out of this side of the calculation because we have written a federal motorboat access grant to help us sustain the ANS program, and that revenue was reflected in the actual years. So going out, we don't anticipate writing that same grant every year to maintain that program. Lottery and GOCO, again, growing with population, and interest in income and other revenues are held relatively flat. Then on the expenditure side, Parks has an even larger driver of expense from personal services, and growing at 2.3% for wage and 4.5% for health, life, dental. It's approximately $5 million of the projected $25 million growth in the period. Operating was largely held flat, but we did include a small amount of money for kind of what I call staff innovation or innovation projects, in that We are hearing from park managers currently that they see opportunities where if they had $2,300 for a temp, they could open a loop on the campground for another year or for another month and possibly generate $22,000. So we're looking at a way to set up that kind of set aside funding so that when these situations occur, we don't want to forego revenue. If we can find a way to cheaply generate more revenue with existing infrastructure, it seems like something we should be doing. So that's something we're working towards. Also in that line, I included $1.2 million for IPAWS expense. So essentially the parks side of our agency has not paid agent commission or system commissions like IPAWS for sales in the past. With IPAWS coming on, those sales will have a commission expense associated with them that will go to Active Networks to pay for development and operations. And based on the contract projections, we're about $1.2 million. I took what was in the contract where Active projected 6 years ago how much it would cost, and I aged it a little bit where it's about $1.2 million annually for that expense. Grants to others I held largely flat. A lot of those are influenced by registrations, and that snowmobile registrations can go back out to snowmobile grants and other similar programs. So I held those flat since I'm relatively flat since I'm holding registrations relatively flat. Capital equipment growing with inflation. On the capital improvement side, however, we added $2.675 million annually to reflect additional investments in maintenance or dam maintenance, potential investments in Cameo or other large shooting ranges, and potential purchase and development of a new state park. So we as a leadership team are aware that our park system is getting to capacity and getting loved to death in areas. We need to be exploring ways to expand our capacity. So I think it's 1.875, and the projection is assuming that every 8 years or so we'd invest $15 million to acquire and develop a new park.
Commissioner Bray.
Justin, other than the ones you just described, Cameo and whatnot, are operating and maintenance funds for all of our existing properties in this category? Is that where they would be?
I'm sorry, in the category for capital improvements?
Yeah.
So
operating and maintenance of all of our state wildlife lands and all that. Is that in this?
So controlled maintenance or even new buildings on parks would be in that. The staff time or utilities or supplies would be up in the operating line for the existing park system. But maintaining our facilities and expanding our existing system would also be in that capital improvements line, yes.
And same on the wildlife side?
Yes, sir.
One more question, if I may.
Commissioner
You may
Bray.
not have got there. On your capital acquisitions, I'm looking on the wildlife funds, you have 0 for 17-18. Is that because of our current moratorium on RFP, or is that some other reason?
Yes and no. So the 0 is meant to reflect the fact that we had a pause in the RFP program where we are going to have that annual investment every year at the same level. There will be a reduced amount over a time frame. Realistically, we will still be closing previously approved RFP projects during that time frame, but if this goes out to legislators that might be interested, I don't want them to just see this program that's continuous when we have told them that we're taking a pause. So that 0 is just to kind of a placeholder to reflect the fact that we have reduced investment in that program.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, if we had not taken that action and we just continued, our bottom line for 17-18 would be almost break even. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And so that kind of brings me to the end of my details. We can dive in.
Pardon me, Justin and Commissioner Bray, that's an interesting comment. Could you explain that a little bit?
Well, roughly, I believe our pause in RFP was what, $5 million, something like that, $5 to $7 million.
Yes, sir.
So if on capital acquisitions for 17-18 was $5 million, say, our net profit would have been $2 million. bottom line, just following it down. Assuming, you know, all of these are just projections. That was just the point I wanted to make.
I see. Thank you.
I'm not advocating in any means that we permanently don't do the RFP. I'm just saying when we reinstigate that, it really makes these numbers scary, you know, sometimes. So that's just one piece of the puzzle, but.
And
Commissioner Zimmerman?
so this is a difficult exercise, right? There's additional dam maintenance, there's additional dam investment out there. Part of the messaging, the implied messaging there is that if we don't get a fee increase, we won't be able to do all these things, and that's something that might fall off. The agency's always going to manage to its highest objectives, and we're not going to ignore a lingering dam problem. It would be nice to have more resources to address it, but if we need to make cuts to address health, life, safety, and other priority needs, we're going to. So as we were out there talking about the things that we want to do with new money, on one hand, I'm in the background trying to jam as much money into our priorities as I can, trying to find ways to make our funding sources fit our needs. So I think with that in mind, it's a challenge, it's a communication challenge. Also, I think as a state agency, we're in a little bit of a weird situation where ideally, if I could pull it off with any aptitude, we would have $0 in net revenue at the end of the year. I don't want to be building up cash. That's not why we're earning money. We want to be providing services and expanding recreation in the state. And we don't want to be eating down what balances we do want to maintain. So we do need maybe a small cushion of cash, but we don't want to continue to profit. So trying to put that into a projection like this is also difficult. And then lastly, kind of the first assumption is that everything we did in fiscal year 17 was where we should be. And so trying to build in with reasonable assumptions the idea that maybe we're understaffed in areas, maybe we need more investment in areas is also tricky. So I think you see this kind of decline over time in the longer forecast where we see we're going to spend more and more and lose more and more money. But if nothing changes, we come back in 8 years, we'd still be trying to spend exactly what we earned at the end of the forecast period.
Commissioner Zimmerman.
Thanks, Justin. On the first couple of slides when you were talking about the projected 8-year projections, with regard to license fees, I know that the numbers are continually going up, but of course, and my understanding is the trend of, the dollar numbers are going up over time, but the trend in numbers of license are decreasing. Is that still the forecast, the trend?
So on the wildlife side in particular?
Correct.
We have seen long-term declines in hunting. We've seen short-term increases. And so we're in the weird position of trying to argue that, yeah, we've been doing great, but we're going to do worse, I promise, in the future. So license numbers have been held flat for the forecast period, just assuming that there will be fluctuations, but we can't predict the overall trend. We've seen strong increases in fishing. I don't know that those will continue at the same rate, so I have an increase, but a slower increase in fishing over the time frame.
Okay, because, on one hand, my argument of, well, our argument of, we have so many more people coming to Colorado that may increase number of hunting licenses. It may also, obviously, it will also increase our demand and our responsibility to continue to serve our mission across a larger number of people. So I think just where I'm going and what I'm seeing is we definitely need to be focusing more on three things. Obviously, a fee bill, a sustainability increase, increased portfolio of revenue sources is something we were talking about with the co-op, the executive summit that is now the recreation co-op, and how we can start to get funds from other sources, and then on an expenditure line item, without additional information, outreach, communication, marketing, however you want to lump all those things together, I don't know that we're going to be able to accomplish that portfolio of increased revenue from current and future new sources. So just something, as I'm looking at the expenditure line item, I'm not positive where marketing, outreach, all of those items come into play, but I think education and that's going to be an expenditure line item that we're probably going to need to look at, perhaps increasing.
Director?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, for this exercise is, like Justin started off, was that there's a lot of assumptions that are going into this. Some may be right or wrong, but, somebody in the LT, as we were talking about this, talked about the tropical storm that's sitting out in the Gulf right now, and then you have the cone of probability that gets really, really wide as far as you go out. But there are assumptions we may not agree, or we may agree on some of them, or at least we can agree is there's a lot of variability in a lot of these. Some we can control and some we can't. And I think what our job is to look at what those assumptions are, and then have indicators that are able to track, are we on track? Sales and moving here and recruitment and retention efforts, and all those things we'll keep doing. And then let that inform you as setting budgets and making changes, to where we're going to be here in the future. And it just continues to be a revolving process. So none of this is set in stone. I think this is really just our best guess. But there's things that we can control in here, and that would be I think a good topic to talk with the commission about is okay, well, what are those things that we can control and should, and then what's the strategy going forward? Because we want to start telling people to be ready for the hurricane 5 days out, not 1 or 2. And if we can help, shrink that cone of that probability down a little bit and verify a lot of these assumptions. But so that's kind of what we looked at, and hopefully that's a good path you want us to continue to go on. But I think at our retreat, I think we could get into a little bit more about what these strategies are, and what are these assumptions. And as like Justin said yesterday, we heard severance tax is we probably get no more severance tax, period. And that's a pretty big hit to our budgets. So how do we prepare for that? So just those kind of scenarios that we know are coming, but I think keeping our eye on the ball. And I think talking about the reserve, we had a reserve, we met it already, but is that enough? And in light of some of these, some of this data that we've got, should we relook at that and continue to have that discussion about that the policy is certainly a good one, but it's not set in stone and things change. So if that's okay with you, we'll continue on with this kind of forecasting here, and then just get this into Justin's budget updates monthly, that we are watching indicators of the economy, we're watching indicators of customers and all of those things, that we'll try to get you the best information that we can, knowing that it's never going to be exact or within our control.
Just on the reserve, that might be something for Commissioner Vigil and the Finance Committee to think about, and certainly how we did it last time, so it might be good to think about it that way. Justin, we have a public comment on one of the items you've just talked about, so if you just would stay there. And Mr. Behrens, if you'd like to come up. Oh, sorry, I apologize. Come on up, Denny, and we have a comment from Commissioner Vigil.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, one of the things when we look at, on both the wildlife side and the park pass, on license passes, fees, and permits, on the wildlife side, we're kind of almost capped based on biology. I mean, we just can't sell more licenses because we don't have the game in a lot of cases. And some areas we do, but not all over. On the park side, my understanding is that we're at capacity basically in most of our parks, unless we make some huge capital improvements to increase camping sites, etc. That's going to be an issue, a tough issue, because of the basically limited on our revenues.
I agree, and those are challenges in the forecast for sure.
Because of that, I think we're going to get a lot of pressure to look at our expenditures, and that's a problem, a real problem for us to decrease expenditures. It's not simple. But when you look at this, it's a classic case of our flat revenues and increasing expenditures. And going forward. That's scary.
I absolutely agree with Mr. Commissioner Vigil had to say. On the park side, we do have a robust capital investment program. So we do about $20 million a year in approved projects for parks. So that includes such things as bringing Staunton online and opening new campgrounds. So I think we are adding some capacity, and I think that supports the idea that we can add a small population trend to both camping and visitation. But I also hear the same things that Mr. Vigil does, and that we are stressing our system, and it will be difficult to sustain large growth going forward. And what he had to say about licenses, I also agree with, and I believe the people that know better than me agree with, that for big game in particular, we don't just sell more licenses because we have more customers. We manage to objectives. There is opportunities for growth in small game and fishing, and we're seeing that in fishing certainly. But I appreciate the comments, and there are definitely good things to keep in mind when looking at these projections.
Okay, Denny, if you would like to come up and ask or make your comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission members. My name is Denny Behrens with Big Game Forever, and some of this stuff is really startling to us as we look at this. And just licenses and fees, you're looking, to increase, which no doubt we have to do, and we understand that. But we're talking about, by 2025, we're talking about an additional $6 million of revenue and licenses that you would like to get. And you need to seriously be thinking, and Commissioner Vigil just mentioned it, we better be increasing our elk and deer populations so that we can do that. Because I know that back in 1998, when we came and had to go in front of the legislature to talk about deer licenses, we got to bring those deer populations back. And we were just looking at statistics from 2006 and 2007, where we had estimated 600,000 deer in the state. And we're nowhere near that right now. So these are some of the tough questions. And then it would drop down to grants to others and payments to other agencies. Are we, as sportsmen, going to be able to find out where those payments are going? Can we request that? Do we have to do a CORA to get that?
I think Justin has talked about it at a high level, but Justin, you want to respond to Mr. Behrens on that point?
Certainly, if I can, I'll respond to both. I'm not going to respond to deer populations because that's not my area. But on
well, I think Denny could probably teach you how to.
But the $6 million figure that he referenced is that revenue growth is entirely attributed to the CPI adjustment on non-resident licenses. I'm not assuming any fee increases or changes in license sales for that number. That's just CPI growth over that forecast period.
That is?
Yes, sir. The additional money is, yes. For payments to other agencies, it's publicly available. It's in our budget reports to the legislature. It's in our budget requests to the legislature. I can provide it on demand easily enough. Off the top of my head, payments to other agencies includes the indirect cost recoveries that we pay to the executive director's office in the state for the services they provide. Because of the way that the accounting system works, other things that fit into payments to other agencies are workers' comp, fleet management, legal services, and there's more, OIT, and the OIT is what's contributing to the large part of the growth there. And I will write it all down and put numbers to it and can send that out. And then the grants to others is also our public grant programs, and I can provide any information that is needed there.
So we will be able to get a sheet of that, or they'll provide it for you and you can provide it to us?
Yes.
Can we request that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, because some people are going to look at this and say, oh my gosh. And then you get down here and look at $30 million in the hole. I mean, how in the world are we going to do that, guys? We're ready to make a proposal to increase funds to the division through a proposal that we're going to bring forward to you. It's not nowhere near $30 million, but if we're going to do this, then we need to have some accountability on the other end to say, hey, how are we going to get to this figure? So, thank you.
Thank you, Denny.
Mr. Chair, real quick, I think what Denny's getting at is the wildlife is only half of that. Well, a portion of that payment, like to OIT, we pay out of wildlife and then also out of parks. So that's where we have split those up, and Justin can show you that just because the fund sources are different, we send 2 payments to OIT for both of those. So that number goes up if you want to look at what that payment is. So I think you need to have parks and wildlife to see, like, how much are we sending to OIT or wherever. You got to have both pieces of paper to see that. So we'll make sure you get that. Just wildlife, right? That's just the wildlife contribution to those payments. Parks has a contribution as well, just because of the different fund sources.
Commissioner Vigil has a comment.
Go ahead, Jim.
Justin, on the payments to other agencies, IPAWS is going to be completed on our go-live date pretty soon, and will OIT costs decrease after we've finished with the implementation of IPAWS?
So I believe when we get out of the development phase of OIT, or of IPAWS, OIT costs as a whole should drop. In addition to the amount that we're sending to OIT, we've also been paying additional payments to contractors to complete some of the networking work that we needed that OIT was unable to get to. I am not confident that change. So currently when we are looking at a particular cost within OIT, which is referred to as line of business staff, which is essentially app development and direct work on applications for agencies. We, for years, a couple years now, have been hearing from OIT that we are the only thing they can get to in DNR, and they cannot direct resources to any other agency because they can only work on IPAWS. And so there may be a small drop in that segment, but that segment is not the only thing that we're being charged for. The large increases have been primarily driven by initiatives from OIT related to cybersecurity. Also, investment in their own infrastructure, investment in server infrastructure, remodeling an office, which irritates me, and other items like that. So I think we may see a small drop in the segment. I do not think that it will lead to a drop in the total.
Thank you, Justin. It's a great presentation. Granularity was really relevant, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Public comments and input. Brent? Do we have any public comment from? Okay, so council is going to advise us on our next, or lay out our path here on this next agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next agenda item is Western Forums. My office has been involved in participating in this project. We have some comments that we'd like to make with regard to the details of how this transaction will actually go through. We're going to save those comments until executive session, so I would propose that the commission listen to the presentation that's given by Ms. Corday, and then withhold taking any action until we have the opportunity to talk with you during executive session. To the extent you have any questions that are legal in nature, we'll save those for executive session as well. And then when I have finished my legal report, and once we've come out of executive session, then I propose the commission decide to take action on this agenda item.
Very good. Great roadmap. So, Ms. Corday, please.
Good morning. Very pleased to be before you here to present this project for the second time. Just to give you a brief little history. Let's see. There we go. 1 year ago today, exactly, at your Lamar PWC meeting, This project was before you as an RFP project. And before I launch into the details of what it was, I just want to bring you back to the setting of this project. So what you see in the picture is approximately a 95-acre lake that was created by gravel mining operations. And on the other side, you see a map, and I'm sorry it doesn't show up quite as well as I'd like, but you see the little yellow spot to the east. That is where this property is located. It's very close to the Kansas border. It's 23 miles east of Lamar. And the other point of this map is to show you how far it is to other public recreation water bodies. So way to the north is the Queens SWA, about 50 miles. Another about 50 miles is to John Martin, way there to the west. And then way to the south is the Two Buttes SWA. So that's how far it is out in this area to get to any public recreation on water. So this is an extremely important project to the community, and that's why we work so hard to bring it back again. So this is in Prowers County. I forgot to mention that. The other important thing is that this is in the Central Flyway. And so you have hundreds of thousands of birds migrating over this area, and that's why that lake has become so important to wildlife. So 1 year ago, we brought this project to you for approval. It had been approved by the PWC in November 2014 as part of one of the 10 RFP projects that were approved. So it was approved as a 700-acre fee title purchase. That included approximately 305 acres of farmland, about 95 acres of this gravel lake, and approximately 395 acres of a mixture of reclaimed land and land that had never been disturbed. And it actually includes, and I'll show you in the next map, 20 acres right along the Arkansas River that connects us to the existing Grenada State Wildlife Area. Another crucial part of the deal was 320 shares of Lower Arkansas Water Management Association, fondly known as LAMA shares. Those were needed for the augmentation plan. In order to keep this open water out on the plains, you've got to augment it. And so the aug plan that's currently in place is actually 420 shares. So the landowners were bringing to the table their 320 as part of the deal, and we already have 100 shares that are going towards this augmentation plan. Those 100 shares are consideration for a current lease right now that's in the, I'm going to show you the, let's see if this has got a pointer here. Okay, right here is a little public parking lot, and right now the lease allows the public to come to that southwest corner and fish. It's a 5-year lease that expires in April of 2018, so it's almost over. So that was part of the deal, and the whole package, the 700 acres plus the llama water rights, was appraised at $1.425 million. So we brought that deal to you last year, and the PWC approved that. And then we moved forward to CDC in December. And this was the project that unfortunately got voted down 3-2 at CDC. And so what were the two main concerns that they expressed, the CDC members? As you all know, one of them was fee title acquisition. And the second one was the farmland. They weren't real excited about the 300 acres of farmland being included in the deal. They basically wanted to see that stay in private hands, private production. So that, as you can imagine, was quite a blow to us and to the landowners for this to be turned down. So the landowners came back to us in January of this year and said, what can we do to still achieve our goals of permanent protection of this land? This is such an important project. Is there another way that we can still achieve our goals? So that is what I've brought to you today. The revised project that we believe still achieves the original RFP goals. And this is what it looks like. So now the map shows a 500 acre block of land. So we've got two zones that I'm going to explain to you, one in blue and one in green, and then land right along the river. So gone from the proposal are 200 acres of farmland right here. And so in fact, all 300 acres, which is this, is 105 acres, and this combined is about 305 acres. All of that stays in the control of the landowner to continue to farm. So we've kind of removed ourselves from that portion of the CDC's concerns. So the rest of this is called the public access zone. This is 395 acres. This consists of the lake, which is now completely joined. This little isthmus has been removed, so the public will be able to launch their boat here and putt around all the way to the other side and fish the entire 95 acres now. They'll no longer be confined to just this one corner. Of course, the other part of the deal that's really important is the 320 shares of llama, and those are going to be encumbered permanently by the public access easement. So there's language in the easement that says they have to be permanently dedicated to that purpose of the augmentation plan. So this is what went to the appraiser to appraise a few months ago after this was all negotiated. And this is what the value came out at, $1.177 million. And there's a donation of 16%. This is what the landowners have been offered and accepted as the purchase price, $990,000. So one last thing I realize I haven't told you about, as much as the farmland goes, that's really serving as an important buffer to keep development and hunters away from this east side of the lake, because this is where tens of thousands of shorebirds and snow geese gather right on this side, so we didn't want hunters coming in from this side, and we didn't want development. So the terms of the public access easement have a section entitled Farm Zone, and those provisions are very similar to a conservation easement. Same kind of thing. You can't put houses and commercial development there. You just continue to farm it. So it's very similar. But the rest of the blue zone, we will be in charge of management of that for public access and for wildlife. So one of the main really important things here is to understand is that we're still achieving our two main goals. We are permanently protecting and being able to manage the lake for tens of thousands of snow geese and other waterfowl and shorebirds. And I just want to give you a kind of a flavor of how many different types of birds now come and depend on this lake. I talked to Kevin Kazmierek and Travis Black, the AWM. Kevin's the property tech. They live out there. This is a very important project to them. And they said that over 100 different species of birds at any different time can be there. So it's going to be fantastic for bird watching. But there's over two dozen different species of ducks and geese, 4 species of grebes, 4 species of plovers, over 24 species of shorebirds, avocets, cranes, herons, 2 federally protected species of birds, the piping plover and the least tern, come to this property, as well as raptors such as bald eagle and osprey. So it's very important from those perspectives. But the other really important reason is for the public recreation. As you can see in this picture, this is a public kids fishing day to get the kids out there. I just thought this was such a terrific picture of what this means to the community. So it's going to provide more recreational area for this whole area, including fishing, hunting, boating, and bird watching.
Is there still gravel operations going on?
I wanted you to see this video. This is what it looks like and sounds like to have 50,000 snow geese take off. It's only 20 seconds long. Pretty amazing. So to answer your question, that equipment that you saw in the background, it's all gone. And the reclamation, the vast majority of the reclamation has happened where all the soil has been put back in place and a cover crop has been planted. So let me make sure I hit some of the other, I wanted to let you know, Travis Black, the AWM, and others have already been working on support letters. We got quite a few great support letters last year for the project. We're getting more again this year and even more. The town of Holly has written a really great letter to say what this means to them, because that's where people will stay, a lot of them, when they come to visit this and recreate. Southeast Colorado Pheasants Forever chapter, Southeast Colorado Two Shots Goose Club, Southeast Colorado Game and Fish Club, Prowers Economic Prosperity wrote a great letter about what this means to the economy, and Broward County Assessor has also written letters, and those will all go to the CDC as a package. One last thing I wanted to show you is how there's already developing two different, very different types of ecosystems on this lake. So this one, with the gravelly shore, this is what's important to those shorebirds and the least tern, the piping plover, and the geese. This is what they like, is open gravel areas. But many other birds and fish definitely like this type of habitat. This is the early successional wetlands type of habitat. And what's coming in here is milfoil and coonfoil, which provides food for the invertebrates that then the fish and the birds feed off of. So it's already developing. Let me see if there was anything else. I think that hits all of the highlights of how this project has been revised and what we're asking for support for today. Is there any questions on that?
Commissioner Bray.
Yeah, I need to better understand the green hash marked private property versus the other that was.
Okay, let me.
The other is just pulled out of the project altogether. The green hash essentially has a term similar to a conservation easement on it.
Correct.
Are they perpetual?
Yes, the whole thing is in one document. It's a permanent access easement.
How is the lake managed today?
It's, right now, the southwest corner, all of this right here, is managed by CPW for public access. So there's no boating. They can come in and park. There's a little gravel parking lot right here. They come in and they can walk along the shoreline here, and then there's a sign that says end of public access. So the rest of it, I wouldn't say is really managed, because it's private property that was just last year a gravel pit. And so all of those operations have now ceased. And we're in this transition period by the property owners waiting to see if this deal can go through.
Okay, as a follow-up question on the green hashed properties here, how does that relate to do they need these water rights to irrigate that?
No, they do not. These 320 shares are completely for the augmentation plan. They, on this acreage right here, the landowners lease it to a farmer who has thousands of acres in the local area that they farm, and they bring in water completely different from what these llama shares are.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zip.
Was the same appraiser that did the initial appraisal versus the second appraisal?
Yes.
Is there, do you know the approximate value of the 320 shares?
Yes.
that's needed for the augmentation?
And that's a little bit of a complex question in that these shares are so tied to that land. If they were not tied to that land, they're worth $500,000. They're basically about $5,000 a share. But they are so tied to this land because it would cost more to fill in that gravel pit than to buy llama shares for the augmentation plan. Does that make sense? Okay.
It just seems like the change in value, given the amount of farmland that was taken out and the fact that the current owner will retain farming use of the 200 acres of the green.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like there wasn't much of a price drop. So I guess the assumption that I would draw is a lot of the value is placed on the lakes and recreation.
Yeah, a very good question. So the farmland is worth just under $1,100 an acre. So the value did drop about $300,000 as that was extracted. But the rest of the land, because it's so encumbered by this easement, that's why there wasn't a huge reduction in fee title value, because CPW is going to have pretty much complete surface control of that 395 acres in the blue. So that's why the value did stay up relatively high compared.
Go ahead, Commissioner Zip.
Just one follow-up. Do we have, does a local wildlife officer or biologist have an idea of kind of the potential for these lakes as far as sustaining strong, vital fisheries?
Yes, I'm going to have Dan Prinsloo answer that.
Good morning. Commissioner Zip, strong, and I lost the last word. Potential, did you say strong?
Oh, just vital or healthy.
Fisheries or wildlife? Both?
I guess with the lakes, we kind of have a good idea of what it supports for birds, but the fishery, is probably a little bit harder to assess. So
right.
More specifically with regard to the fishery.
Okay, thank you. Be glad to answer that. And I won't have biomass, but it's currently, because of the reclamation's been ongoing, it's a very productive warm water fishery. And then we will place trout in it in really early spring and late fall. But it's a good warm water fishery. It will go nowhere but up as the reclamation continues to take hold. So, but it is a self-sustaining warm water fishery in that lake. So, and it has been part of the reason we've leased it, even though we only had a portion of the water for fishing. So we leased it for dual purposes, obviously fishing, and then in the winter we close that lake to public access, so those geese will sit on the lake every day, and then they fly off every day, and people get to hunt them for the 100 square miles around there, and then they come back every night, and we'll do that so they stay in the area.
Just one more follow-up. How long has the lake been filled?
I'm not sure. I think we've had the portion that we had leased in the southwest corner probably for 10 years. So I bet it's the full lake. I don't think they finished gravel mining until about a year or two ago. Right. So last 2 years was actual full water. And the landowners are obviously, they have to augment that water. That's a non-option because it's not lined. That's their motivation for selling or easing this property, is that this body of water that exposed in the gravel pits required to be paid 420 acre feet a year of water.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Not seeing any further questions or comments. I think we're ready for the next stage in your process here, Nick.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll go ahead and go into the legal report. I just have a few introductions I'd like to make during open session and then a number of matters to discuss during executive session. First, with the transition we've been going through in our office with Tim Monahan's retirement, we've had a number of new positions that have become available, and so I wanted to introduce you to one of your new attorneys and then the new First Assistant Attorney General for our office. So first, I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Joyce. Elizabeth, will you stand up? So Elizabeth comes from private practice to our office. She specializes in water rights and water transactions. She's going to be leading our team, our water group team at our office with Heather Warren, handling all water issues and transactions on behalf of the division and commission. We're really excited to have Elizabeth on our team. And if I recall correctly, prior to being a practicing lawyer, Elizabeth used to work for Colorado Parks and Wildlife as a biologist doing mountain lion research on the Front Range, correct? So she's come full circle, and we're excited to have her, and you'll be seeing and hearing her throughout the course of her career with our office.
Fantastic, and welcome.
The next individual I'd like to introduce you to is Lisa Reynolds. Lisa, we are very excited, is taking over Tim Monahan's position as the First Assistant Attorney General for the Parks and Wildlife Unit. She will supervise our unit. Lisa has been with our office since 2014. She has been the state attorney representing the state of Colorado on all Endangered Species Act cases and matters. And we're really excited to have her on board and lead our group. I wanted to give Lisa a minute to talk through a little bit about how she envisions the future representation of both division and commission going. So Lisa, I'll go ahead and let you speak.
Thanks, Nick, and good morning, everyone, commissioners, director. Really delighted to be here. I'm really thrilled about this new position. And I first want to say that I'm not here to replace Tim Monahan, because all of you who have been with the commission for a while know that there's no replacing Tim Monahan. And we are very fortunate that Tim is still with us part-time. He works 2 days a week, and he's going to be continuing to work with us on general counsel matters. Thank God, for a couple more years. As Nick said, I'm the First Assistant Attorney General for Parks, Wildlife, and Trust Lands, which means that I supervise all the attorneys that represent this division and commission, and also all the attorneys that represent the State Land Board. And I am currently also the Endangered Species Act attorney. We're down two full-time attorneys right now. We still need to replace our real estate attorney, and we have one more general counsel position open. It's the half position that Tim vacated, and it'll be half of the Endangered Species Act work. So when we're fully staffed, we should have a full-time attorney who can work with the real estate group, 2 full-time attorneys who can work on water issues, and then we'll have 3.5 attorneys dedicated to general counsel work. The biggest shift that I think you'll actually notice is that we're going to be having, instead of one attorney assigned to represent the commission, we're going to have 2 going forward, and that'll be Nick Lopez and Jake Matter, who you probably saw at the table in Steamboat. And there are a number of reasons for that. One of them is that Nick is also the primary trial attorney for the division, and when he has trial obligations, to the extent that that interferes with commission work, he needs to prioritize trial stuff. And so Jake and he can balance those 2 things. I think it's going to work well, but I just wanted to let you know that's how we're doing it going forward, because you're used to seeing the same face at every meeting. With respect to general counsel questions, we all work pretty closely as a team. We consult with each other on pretty much a daily basis. And when you have questions, you are welcome to reach out to either me or to Nick or to Jake, or frankly to Tim. If you want to reach out to Tim, he's only in on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. But because we're all working really closely together, it's not as important who the person is that you reach out to, because all of us are going to be sharing responsibility for getting back to you and answering your questions. So that's how we're going to be organized going forward. I hope it works really well. If you have any concerns about the structure or about legal issues, please don't ever hesitate to let me know, and we'll get them addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And just to follow up on procedure, one of the things, since we have a few new commissioners, that I wanted to point out is last week I sent you a written legal report. You can expect to get a written legal report from either Jake or myself probably about a week before each commission meeting. That written legal report will outline some of the more major cases and issues and tasks that our office is working on, just to keep you updated on what's going on there. Some of those issues will be discussed in executive session, others may not. So if you ever have questions and specific about any of those issues in the written legal report, please do not hesitate to contact us. The other procedural issue that I wanted to bring up was that in talking with the chairman, one of the things that he proposed was the idea of having council provide maybe a 2 or 3 minute overview on a discrete legal issue that comes before the commission on a fairly consistent basis. And so what Jake and I are going to do is we're going to try and find some of those discrete issues and give you just a brief outline about the process with those issues and what they mean at each meeting. If you have any issues that specifically you'd like to know a little bit more about, please let us know and we'll make sure to include that in a future meeting. So that concludes what I need to discuss in open session. I also have a few matters that I need to discuss during executive session. Specifically, I need to discuss pending litigation in the case Colorado Parks and Wildlife versus 5 Star Feedlot Incorporated, case number 16CV30022, which involves litigation concerning a fish kill incident on the South Fork of the Republican River. I also need to discuss Wild Earth Guardians versus Colorado Parks and Wildlife, case number 17CV30219, which involves a challenge to the Commission's decision to approve predator studies in the Piceance and Upper Arkansas River Basin. I also need to provide legal guidance on what obligations the Commission has while conducting rulemaking under Section 24.4.103, subsection 2 of the Administrative Procedures Act. And then we also need to provide legal guidance on the legal mechanics of the transaction involving Midwestern Farms public access easement that was described during agenda item number 34. So with that, I request that the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission enter into an executive session to discuss with council and receive legal guidance on the legal issues and pending litigation just described, pursuant to Section 24.6.402, subsection 3A, Roman numeral 2 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. We'll need a motion in a second. I will ask for a recorded roll call. We will also need a 2/3 supermajority vote with 8 members.
The chair would entertain a motion.
I so move.
Second from Commissioner Zip. Adrian, if you could call the roll, please.
Bray?
Yes.
Hauser? Yes. McDaniel?
Yes.
Vigil?
Yes.
Wingfield?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
Zip?
Yes.
And Chairman Howard?
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. I ask that members of the public and staff that are not directly involved with these matters please leave the room for the duration of the executive session.
would have happened if he'd lost phone contact and we couldn't come out? We'd be here all day, or? Only 7 of us, we couldn't come out.
The meeting would be done at that point. Okay, we are back online, and I just need to make a record. While in executive session, I discussed pending litigation in the cases Colorado Parks and Wildlife versus 5 Star Feedlot Incorporated, case number 16 CV 30022. I also advised the Commission on pending litigation in case number 16 CV 30219, which is the case of Wild Earth Guardians versus Colorado Parks and Wildlife. In addition, while in executive session, I and other attorneys from my office provided legal guidance on the following legal questions. What obligations the Commission holds under Section 24.4.103, subsection 2 of the Administrative Procedures Act during the rulemaking process, and what are the legal mechanics of the transfer of the Midwestern Farms public access easement as described during agenda item number 34. Now that we are out of executive session, I understand that we are going to go back to agenda item number 34. I ask that we make sure that members of the public that may be outside the room are informed that this is open session again and have the opportunity to comment on that agenda item if they should so choose. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council. Just waiting to see if anybody in the public's coming back in. I think we're good. So we have one action item left. I think the best way to proceed would be to do a motion and then have the discussion on the motion, if that meets with commissioners' preference. So. Right, this is on item 34, which I'll try and read without my glasses, Midwestern's Farm RFP. So it would be a motion, as I understand it, would be a motion to proceed, but with staff considering suggestions that we, I guess, would make. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if I could just clarify on the record. So, yes, so we would need a motion to approve the agenda item number 34. With the idea that certain legal questions were asked during executive session that will need to be answered and addressed in further meetings moving forward, and which my office will be working with division staff during contract negotiations to resolve.
And would that motion give staff what they need to proceed?
Yes, I believe if you provide some clarity of what you would like us to address, then we can work with the AG's office to address those issues.
Council, do we need to recycle those ideas here on the public record as part of the motion, or can we just proceed?
So I think the motion can be a motion to approve the proposal as drafted with the understanding that division staff will work with the Attorney General's office to identify and to the extent we can resolve any legal risks that may be posed and which were raised during executive session.
Great. So the chair would entertain that motion.
So moved.
Commissioner Zimmerman. Second from Commissioner Zip. Discussion? Commissioner Bray.
Thank you. I'm uncomfortable with the transaction primarily due to the cost. I think the cost of the water rights perpetually is fairly expensive. Also, as far as use of the facility by the geese in the game, I think that's going to be there whether we own it or not. I think the geese are always going to be there. I just can't buy the argument that they're going to go away if we don't own the property. So I'm just a little uncomfortable with the whole thing, with the complexity of it, and that's kind of where I stand.
Commissioner McDaniel.
I'm a little uncomfortable the way we talked about. I guess I'm looking for more clarity about whether the transaction would come back to us once you figure out some language to add some surety about the protection of the property. I'm kind of uncomfortable approving it, saying that will happen and it not coming back again, because I don't know what that is, and it's a large amount of money to pay for a piece of property that has potentially some risk of loss to it, so it makes me nervous to approve it. I don't know if you can change the motion or do it somehow to where you can approve and move forward, but then you have to come back, show us how we can feel more confident about the transaction.
So,
Second
Commissioner
time?
McDaniel, you could, we're not very Roberts rulesy, but the way to do that would be make a motion to amend, which would then be heard first, and then we'd go to the main motion. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Can I offer some guidance, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, absolutely, Counsel.
So, Commissioner McDaniel, you have the ability to amend the motion to another motion that you feel more comfortable with. One of the things that I might propose based on some of the comments that have been raised just now is perhaps you move to approve this proposal to go through the CDC process, which I believe is the next step of this process, but require that division staff bring the final agreement that's been drafted with a contract back to you for further consideration before it's fully implemented and signed. So that's an option. I think that's something that division staff would be acceptable to doing. So that is an option at your disposal.
What you said.
So I'm going to interpret
I
that
make
as
that
Commissioner
amendment.
McDaniel has made a motion to amend the underlying motion to include what counsel has just described. So,
I'd second that amendment.
very good. So any further discussion? Seeing none, Adrian, could you call the roll? This is on the motion to amend the main motion.
Can I ask a procedural question?
Of course, Commissioner Bray.
So we vote on the amendment, and then what?
Then we'll vote on the underlying motion, which has been amended by the vote on the amendment. And I'm happy to cut through all this, and we can just say if we've got to.
We could pull the original motion and then just rely on the motion by Mr. McDaniel.
Either way.
Again, we're not too Roberts rulesy here. So perhaps then I'll restate the underlying motion, which is we're going to approve the transaction to go through to CDC with the understanding that then, if it is successful, it will come back to the commission with any additional changes to the proposal that staff has worked out. Great. Let's have a roll call vote then.
Bray?
No.
Hauser? Yes. McDaniel?
Yes.
Vigil?
Yes.
Wingfield?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
Zip?
Yes.
And Chairman Howard?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I believe that's our last action item, Adrian? Yes, sir. Or our last item. I just want to thank everybody for, Commissioner Wingfield.
How many acre feet does 300 shares of llama represent?
It's, I believe it's a guaranteed, so if it's a preferred llama share, I think it's 1 acre foot per share. If it's a it gets complicated, we're providing right now a quarter, I think, of the water, but ours are not preferred shares, and I think they're evaluating it 7/10 of an acre foot. So it's close to 1-to-1.
Just for the record, that was Southeast Regional Manager Dan Prenslow.
Thank you, Chairman Howard.
Just before we conclude, I just wanted to thank everyone for welcoming us here to Yuma, and Commissioner Wingfield. I can't tell you how heartbroken to think this will be the last time he'll be our host, but we'll hopefully see him around, at least for the commissioner side. I also want to just make the observation of how great it is to have 4 new commissioners. We had lost 2 very dynamic commissioners for quite a while in Commissioner Kane and in Commissioner Castilian, and the energy level our new commissioners are bringing is great, and we're glad to have you here and really appreciate that. It's also kind of exciting too. We've got a strategic planning session coming up. We haven't done that, I think, for almost 3 years. It was right after I started, and so it's an exciting time to readdress that, I think, and to think about it. So I'm this was a great meeting. I feel really good about the next year, and a great honor, obviously, to serve as chairman. So thanks very much, and some of us will head out to the field now, I think.